and thank you so much for joining me for this second video in my, what I'm calling my small color palette Valentine's videos. Today I am going to be showing you 3 Valentine's cards. They are all 3 fairly simple and quick cards using a very limited color palette. It is just black and red with maybe a white card base. I am using, for the first card, these 2 sets. It's the Simon Says Stamp Tossed Hearts background stamp. Really nice deep impression, got some stitched hearts here, some nice background color, and the Simon Says Stamp Big XOXO die set. Large die greeting, so that's very, very nice. And colors, so I have a black card base. This is Hero Arts, it's their premium cardstock. Color is pitch black. This is an A2 card base that I've already scored. And I have 2 sheets of, this is also Hero Arts, the color is cranberry. And I have a cover panel, and I also have another piece that I'm going to be using for my large XO die cuts. And I have just a piece of black layering weight cardstock. I'm not even sure what this is. It's a lighter weight. It's from my scrap bin, and I will be using this for the die cuts as well. So that is all of the cardstock, other than maybe a small panel for the inside, because this is a black base to write your message to the recipient. So I'll get started on this first card. This panel is 4 by 5 1/4, so it's a nice panel size for the front of the A2 card. Gives a really nice black margin around the outsides. I am going to stamp this in my MISTI, and I'm going to put a very small piece of tape on the back to hold this down. I've got some low-tack tape here. I could use a sticky mat. I don't have my sticky mat out and handy, so I'm going to just use this tape. So I generally like to decide how I want the image on the front to stamp onto the card, onto the panel. Sometimes there are some images that are upright a little more. I think this is fine. So I will place this on my panel, pick this up with the front, and then I am going to ink this up with Versamark ink, and I am going to heat emboss with clear embossing powder. So I don't actually need this entire image, but I don't want to have to stamp this multiple times. So I'm going to go ahead and ink up my entire rubber stamp. And then I'll check and make sure that every space is inked. Then that actually looks really good. I didn't use anti-static powder. This is a very large image and it's pretty well covered. I think that my clear embossing powder is going to do a good job here without sticking places where I don't want it to stick. I'm going to use clear embossing powder and a folded sheet of paper to catch my extra powder. I like how clear embossing powder on a colored background just makes sections of the background look even darker. So it almost creates a two-toned effect. Okay, I'm going to heat this up. Love, love, love that look. Make sure that everything is melted. Okay, I'm going to put this aside to cool, and I will start on the die cuts. I'm going to layer my die cuts, so I will only need to cut this once out of each color. That will give me 2 layers, which is plenty of dimension for the front of this card. So I think I will die cut these in my Gemini. These are nice large die cuts with a great beveled edge, so they layer really well. They give a lot of really good dimension if you use a heavier weight cardstock. Very pretty. Okay, next I'm going to work on my sentiment for the front, and I'm going to use this Spellbinders Mini Everyday Sentiments. It has a P.S. I Love You. This is a hot foil set, so I am going to foil this on black cardstock. So I'll just trim this down. And I'm going to use this Spellbinders red foil. It's a really nice, shiny, metallic looking foil. My hot foiling machine is off camera, so I will hot foil this and then we can move along. Okay, I have my foiled sentiment. I'm going to tape this down, tape this die down. This is the sentiment die that came with the Spellbinders Mini Everyday Sentiment set. So I'll tape this down and then run this back through my Gemini. Okay, this is everything we need for the front of the card. So I will, I guess we'll need this as well. I'm going to start to assemble this card, checking out my score line here to make sure that I'm folding on the valley side. So when you score, there's a mountain side where it's the bottom of the paper when you're scoring, and then there's a valley side. It's the top where you make the score line. So you want to have the valley side up when you're folding and scoring. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that everything looks good here. I like the border. And I'm going to use my T-square ruler to line everything up. So I'll start by stacking these. I'm going to use just liquid adhesive. And I'm going to create a shadow with that, with the black die cut in each set. So black on the bottom, red on the top, a little bit of a shadow layer showing. we can start to line these up, and I'm going to try to center them as much as I can with a little bit of space in between so that there's an equal margin around. So I'll just play around with these for a bit here and make sure that I have a layout that I like before I start to glue these down. Okay, last step is my little sentiment here for the front, the PS I love you, and I'm going to use a tiny sliver of a foam square here on the end where it hangs over the side. Let's see, I think I have one that's cut here. So just here on the very end, so my sentiment's supported. And then I can put glue on the rest. And make sure that's straight. Okay, so that front panel is complete. I just need to put this on my card base, and I don't need any more dimension. I already have multiple layers here on this card base, so I'm just going to glue this down. Okay, that card is complete. So that is card number 1. On to card number 2. Card number 2 uses this die cut, this quilted heart that I cut for the shaker card in video number 1. So I kept this heart. I will show you how I made that. We are going to be using the quilted card front die again. This is from Concord and 9th. And also this Dress My Craft Stitched Scalloped Hearts die set. And then I pulled out my Lawn Fawn Just Stitching double rectangles. I do want to do some double stitching around the panels on this card. So these are the dies. This paper that I used for the quilted heart is from Erin Lee Creative. It is a glossy black cardstock. It comes in 8.5 by 11 sheets. It's 80-pound cardstock, so it's a really nice, little bit heavier than just normal layering weight, which is great, and such a shiny black finish. Really beautiful for this quilted heart. I have an A2 card base. This is a white heavyweight base weight cardstock. I am using, again, the Hero Arts Cranberry cardstock. This is 3 3/4 by 5. This is going to be a shadow layer for the front panel. This is the front panel of the card, heavyweight white cardstock, so this is the same weight as the base weight of the card. This is 4 7/8 by 3 5/8. So these create a very nice layered look with a little bit of a frame on the front of the card. I also have just a smaller piece of the red cranberry cardstock. I will be heat embossing with black shiny embossing powder for the greeting for this card. So I'm going to start by showing you how I cut the quilted heart. Need this second largest heart die. So when I'm doing any sort of large treatment, card front treatment, and a die cut, I always die cut first so that I don't crush any of the embossing layers that I'm creating. So I'm going to run this through my glimmer machine, or through my Gemini. Won't do any good to run it through my glimmer machine. I tape this down. My plates are getting a tiny bit warped. I've had them for quite a long time, and I've been very fortunate that they haven't warped in probably the year and a half that I've had this. But I have cut a few things without, the key really I think is this plastic shim. It takes all of the brunt of the abuse when this is going through the Gemini Junior. And I did cut a few things where I couldn't use the shim, and my plates started to warp a little, so just a note. Okay, so there's my heart with just the scalloped and stitched edges. And now I want to run this through again with my embossing plate. Okay, here's my embossed heart. And the sandwich that I used for my embossed heart, this may be different for you, but for my Gemini Junior, it's the bottom plate, then the embossing cover plate with the cutting side up, my heart with the shiny side down, and then my rubber embossing mat. This comes with your Gemini Junior. My top plate, and then my my shim. Yours may be different, and sometimes it takes a little experimentation using the most shallow layer possible so you don't get things stuck in your Gemini. So use the least that you think you need to use, and then kind of work your way up from there, adding additional pieces of cardstock or your shim or whatever you need to based on what you are cutting. Obviously, always check the user's manual for the Gemini to understand what Gemini recommends that you should use. Okay, so I'm sorry, but what Crafter's Companion thinks you should use. So now we have two of these. I am going to next start to emboss my panels with the Just Stitching double rectangles. So I put some tape on here to remind myself which ones of these I used for my test card. These don't cut. I use these in a lot of my videos, and I always make sure to state that these do not cut, they only emboss. So there is no cutting edge on these dies. It is just the double stitched rectangle embossing. I love these. I use them so much. It's almost embarrassing. I use them so much. So I am going to emboss my front white panel. So this is that smaller 4 7/8 by 3 5/8 white panel. And I'm using the, what is this? This is the second largest rectangle die. And then I'm also going to emboss my front panel. So I will run both of these panels back through my Gemini, create my embossing, and then I'm ready to move on to the greeting. Okay, I have embossed my front panel and my card base, and the next step is to create my sentiment. So I have this small piece of red cardstock. I'm going to stamp this up in my MISTI, and I am going to use black embossing powder to stamp and emboss this greeting. So I am going to use the Altenew Sentiment Strips 2, and I am using the I Just Adore You stamp. This is a nice set, lots of different greetings for different occasions, and I pull this out quite a bit for cards. So, but let's stamp this up first and get this embossed. So I'll use my anti-static powder tool. I just think the black embossing on the red cardstock is so beautiful. And sorry, I'm doing too many things at once. The black embossing powder is very shiny, so it makes a really great impression. I'm going to make sure that I didn't, when I pushed that down, that I didn't double stamp it, and I think that I did. It looks like I have maybe a little shadow layer there, so I'm going to restamp this. I want a really nice crisp impression. And you know what, when you're card making, these things happen sometimes, and it's just paper in a few minutes of time. Just flip it over and keep going. Using Versamark ink. Okay, that looks better, makes me feel better. Okay, so I have some black embossing powder. This is Midnight Black. I don't remember the brand for this embossing powder, and I believe that it's Wow, but I'm not sure, so I'll check and I will put the note on my blog. I don't think everybody has Midnight Black, but I do think it's Wow. I'm gonna make sure I don't have any stray powder. Okay, that looks great. So I will heat this up. Okay, this is cooled, so I'll get all of this extra powder off. You can see how beautiful and shiny that is against that red background. So pretty. So I'm going to cut this, let's see, I'll die cut this. This is a good size for my heart. Yes. All right, so I'm going to tape this down. I'll get this centered. I'll tape this down and run this through my die cut machine. Okay. That looks great. I do think I might cut one more. I'm deciding if I want to cut another one or use foam tape, and maybe I'll just use my very thin, I think it maybe is an 1/8 of an inch foam tape to adhere that. So I have all of my panels. The only other thing I need for this card, I am using this Offray, it's black dotted ribbon. It's 3/8 of an inch, and it's just these cute black dots. So I'm going to put this behind my heart. So I'm going to need, maybe, I don't know how much that is, maybe, what's that, 7 or 8 inches of ribbon. Probably not even that much, honestly. This is probably good. Okay, this is everything. I'm going to use some glue. I am going to use some very, very thin foam tape. When I say very, very thin, this is very, very thin. Okay, so let's start with the ribbon. So the ribbon goes behind. Let me also going to use a tiny piece of score tape to hold this on. I'm going to keep it really steady. I don't want my ribbon to shift as I am putting all of my layers together. So I'll center this on my ribbon. I can always trim off extra ribbon that I don't need. So I'll just put a small piece of score tape on the back, and then I can put my ribbon over the top of that score tape and it'll hold it in place while I'm putting everything together. So I'm going to make sure that this is centered. That looks pretty good. And now I can place my heart on my panel. And again, I'm going to use 2 small pieces of score tape to hold this in place on the back. I want to make sure that it is perfectly straight on my panel. So I'm just using the score tape to hold this ribbon steady. Final check before I start gluing things down. That looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. Okay, so I'm going to put just a tiny bit of glue underneath each side of my heart now that everything is centered, straight. Hold it for just a second to make sure that it is going to stick. Okay, my white panel will be centered on my red panel. And now I can adhere this completed front panel to my card base. Okay, that is straight. And last step is to just adhere my sentiment to the center of my heart. So I'm going to put this on with just a tiny piece of foam tape to bump this up a little bit, give it a little bit more stability. It is a single layer. That'll pop it out just a little bit. This is a very simple card. I'm loving the black and red. Okay, use my reverse tweezers so I can keep my hands out of the way and make sure that I'm getting everything centered here. All right, before I press this down, I want to make sure that it's level. It is. That looks great. Okay, so when you are folding this card, the card is going to want to have a tendency to fold on these double stitched lines. I've left this flat because it was easier for me to line things up while it's flat and not folded and scored. But just know that when you fold this, it's going to want to fold right there rather than on your score line. So just give it a little help along the score line here when you're starting to fold, and then you should be good. It's just a weaker point along the double scoring, the double stitching, than it is along the score line. But that worked out really well. Okay, that is the completed card number 2. Okay, card number 3. I am using 2 sets from Hero Arts. These are, I believe they're called stamp and cut sets, and you can find these on the Hero Arts website. You can find them online at Joann. I am a frequent shopper at Joann, and I love these sets. When I see them, I generally will pick up the ones that are that I find very interesting. I found these for Valentine's Day, so I am going to use these. This one is called Heart Tree. This one is called Love. I'm using the Momenta nesting square nesting dies to cut some frames. And paper. I don't normally do top fold A2 cards, but I am doing a portrait top fold A2 card for this one. So I have a white A2 card base top folded. I have a black panel that is an A2 size, so it's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. A white panel, same size. This is going to be a border or a frame cut. And then I have 2 pieces of red cardstock. I'm going to cut the greeting out of one of these, and the other one will be a background for the tree die cut that I'm going to do. So I'm going to start by die cutting the frame, the black frame, and then the front panel. So put these aside. Again, I've marked the 2 dies that I need. These are, let's see, this is the 2 7/8 inch square, and then this is the 3 1/4 square. So if you're counting by or determining by the size, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is the 7th smallest, the 8th smallest in the die set, or you can just measure. So I need 2 frames here. Oops, that's my card back, my card base. Here's my front panel. So I'm going to cut the larger square first, and then I can line up my smaller square and die cut based on where my larger square is. So I'm going to line this up on my craft mat. This, the squares here will really help you keep everything aligned and keep everything straight. And I'll take this down and run this through my die cut machine. I try to tape to the inside so I don't get any tape marks on my front panel. Okay, now I want to cut my black frame, so I'm just going to line these up, and I'm going to put my smaller black frame inside and line up based on how I've cut my white one. Then I can just tape this down, and I should have perfect alignment on my black panel. Okay, here's my black panel. Okay, so I want to stamp next. So I'm going to line up my stamp on the inside of my panel. Stamp this in my MISTI. And again, I'm not going to stamp in, I'm not going to heat emboss this in black. I am going to heat emboss, but I'm going to stamp it in black and then heat emboss with clear, and I will tell you why I'm going to do that in just a moment. So I'm going to line these up really quickly. So this is my inside frame, my inside black frame, and I want my image to be positioned inside this black frame. And I like that, so I'm going to stamp this in black ink. I'm using VersaFine Clear. Love this ink. If you follow my channel, you know I use this ink a lot. It is, it's just a beautiful black. It is so crisp, so deep. My stamp pad's still pretty new and juicy, so I get really good impressions generally with one stamping. If I want really intense black, I will stamp twice. Make sure that that's in the corner. And that actually doesn't need a second stamping. That looks pretty good. There's something on that little heart right there. I'm not sure what it is. I'll wipe it off a bit with my finger and maybe just re-stamp that. I'm not sure exactly what that is stuck on there. It looks like maybe a little piece of fuzz or something. Okay. All right. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to wipe off my stamp, but I'm leaving my stamp inside the MISTI exactly where it is because I'm going to dry this with my heat tool for just a second, and then I'm going to stamp this again with embossing ink. This is dry. I'm going to leave it in my MISTI. I have left my stamp in the exact same spot. And now I'm going to ink up my stamp, with some Versamark embossing ink. And I'm going to stamp over this image again. And I'm going to use some clear embossing powder to heat emboss this image. So it'll give me a really nice shiny black tree and shiny black hearts on my card. Just using a sheet of folded paper to catch my excess embossing powder. This is Sizzix clear embossing powder. It's my favorite clear embossing powder. Okay, I'm going to heat this up with my heat tool. Okay, I have a nice shiny black tree. And the great thing about doing it this way with the black ink and then the clear embossing powder is that you do not have to worry about getting any stray flecks of black embossing powder on this white background, and it would show up very, very clearly because it's white. So didn't have to worry about that. It's perfect image, perfectly stamped and embossed. So love that. Okay, the next thing that I'm going to do, going back to the tree stamp and cut set. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Sorry to Hero Arts if I'm not. I will correct myself on my blog. I have this die, and I didn't know how to use this. When I first got the set, I was die cutting some little hearts and I was gluing them on, and then I realized it's actually meant to go over the top of your image. So I'm going to open up my base panel, and I've made some little marks here on my die to show how to line it up. So these two little marks are for the trunk. And if you place this on the paper correctly, lined up correctly, you will see that inside the die cut for every single one of these little hearts, there's no inking. So this is going to cut all of these little heart shapes out of this base panel for the tree, and then I can use a red panel in behind for some red hearts on my tree, red heart leaves. So when you're lining this up, just make sure when you line it up that these three little hearts at the bottom are on each side of the trunk, and that each of these little heart-shaped leaves have no stamping behind them. Okay, next thing that I need to do is to die cut the sentiment, so the greeting. I am going to go back to this little Hero Arts love set, and I'm going to use this love die cut, and I'm also going to use the All You Need Is. That will be the sentiment and greeting for the front of my card. So I'll die cut this love greeting 3 times out of this red cranberry cardstock from Hero Arts. Okay, I have my die cuts. I'm going to go ahead and stack these. I have 3 of them. I'm going to stack them to give my greeting just a little bit of, give it a little bit of dimension and pop it up a bit on the front of the card. I love this, this cranberry cardstock is so pretty. This is a nice die. It has nice beveled edges. Love the font on this greeting. Okay, there is my greeting. Last thing to do is just to assemble the card. So I am going to go ahead and stamp this, stamp the front here. I won't put this greeting on until the very end, but I do want to stamp this because I don't want to try to stamp this after everything is all assembled. It'll be several layers and not the easiest thing in the world to do that. So I'm going to stamp this in VersaFine Clear. Pretty. Okay, I'm going to give this just a second to make sure it's dry before I do anything else with this panel, but I can start assembling the inside. So this red panel goes on the inside, creates the red heart leaves. I'm going to trim this down so nothing shows on the outside red panel or the outside card from this red panel along the edges. So I'm just going to give it a little bit of a haircut on each side, not very much. I mean, that's maybe a 1/16 of an inch. And that looks very good. So I'll go ahead and glue this panel down to the inside. I'm going to kind of center it on each edge, but push it up toward the front. You can also glue another red panel on this side to make each side match. I think that's a really good look. That's the inside panel. This black panel goes next. This is just a little frame for the inside. Making sure that I have the beveled side up. Okay, and last is our white panel on the front. My black panel should be framed perfectly inside since I lined everything up when I cut. And the last thing to do is just to put my sentiment on, or my greeting. Again, I'll use my reverse tweezers so I can get good placement and keep my fingers out of the way. That is the completed card. Here are the completed cards from today's video, and the pink and black color series cards from the video that I released yesterday. I hope you have enjoyed this series. I have really enjoyed making these cards. I love these color palettes. I'll have all of the materials and measurements, everything up on my blog at Pretty Paper Blackbirds. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.